Some of the highlights I think that are worthy of mention here. We've done a number of things with respect to energy savings at the city. Obviously, I think everyone in this room, everyone who will be watching anything we're saying, listening to anything we're saying, any homeowner in the province of Ontario would appreciate and agree that the cost of energy has escalated quite significantly. So the city has taken a number of steps to try and save on energy, and you'll understand what the pressure is in just a few minutes. There is a $10.5 million that administration has come forward with that they've recommended in cuts. And those recommendations, again, council gave direction saying, show us what the path to zero is. Administration has done that. They've shown us what the path to zero is, and in so doing, they found $10.5 million in recommended cuts that will have limited or no impact on service delivery. In the city of Windsor, we're expecting 2017, we'll see a $1.6 million increase in new assessment. So that's new construction that's happened in the city, for which the city is now collecting tax dollars on that construction, on that assessment. We have, when you get the documents, you'll see through better interest and better management of cash flows, approximately $1 million in savings accruing to the city of Windsor. And when we talk about capital budget, and we can go through any of the questions you have when we get there, capital budget shows that we will be spending almost $550 million over the next 5 years, and more than half of that goes right to roads and sewers. Okay. Some of the pressures that we're seeing, provincial hydro costs. Provincial hydro costs increasing in the city of Windsor, notwithstanding the energy savings initiatives that we've employed and the fact that we're using less energy than we had in the prior year. Those costs are expected to rise by $2 million for the city of Windsor. And when we frame this in terms of what the impact is, $2 million is half of 1% on the tax levy. So $4 million is 1% roughly. Half a percent is $2 million, and that's what we're going to see just on hydro pressures alone. And these are, again, as everyone knows, costs that are truly beyond our direct control. There has been new provincial legislation that affects firefighters, new presumptive legislation for firefighters. The impact on the corporation of the City of Windsor, again, something that's not within our control, is $1 million per year, 0.25% on the levy. Administration looked at the purchasing power, so the purchasing power on capital. And of course, we collect all the money, it goes into an operating fund, and then we put money, transfer money from operating into capital to fund the capital program. And the purchasing power, of course, when you hold the line, you do lose because of inflation. And so what we're trying to do, what administration's recommending, is that we take $2 million and top up the capital fund to make sure that we're not losing out on the amount of roads and sewers and capital projects that we can do, and that's, again, 0.5%. Our ABCs, agencies, boards, and commissions, we have limited control on many of the costs that flow through there. And so we're looking at a $4 million increase on ABCs, 1%. And these are things like, use the health unit as an example, where the Act specifically requires a municipality to pay the expenses of the health unit in proportional share with the county. So we have, the health unit last year received a $1 million increase from the province of Ontario, still passed along an increased assessment to the City of Windsor, and myself and members of council and any member of administration here at the city is completely powerless with respect to our ability to control those costs. They're completely flow-through costs. IRCA is another one, and we look at police and some of the other examples. We do have more control over police. Of course, I sit on the Police Services Board, I chair that board, but you get into some of the legislative costs, whether it's arbitrated costs, whether it's collective bargaining costs, and those arbitrated rulings and collective bargaining agreements are adding 1.5% to the levy. And when we look at police and fire, a third of our overall budget is police and fire, and that is growing at. And the reason I mention this, it's growing at. The costs are growing at about 3% per annum on police and fire. When you don't see that same pressure on other departments, other staff. So we talk about the effect of arbitration, the impact that it has on residents. The numbers don't lie. There's a direct impact, and their costs. And some would say, and let me mention this, some would say You guys didn't go to arbitration at police this year. We actually negotiated the collective agreement. But we always do that with the lens of, if we don't agree and it goes to arbitration, where could we end up? And so we try and find that sweet spot that works for the association, but also works for taxpayers, and you know, has taxpayers first and on the forefront in everyone's mind when they're making that decision. So those costs are pressures on the system.
Is it $4 million for police and fire?
The $4 million is the ABCs.
ABCs, yeah.
All the agencies,
the
boards,
ABC.
and commission.
Yeah. Which includes police. Okay, doesn't include fire, but it includes police. The operation of the new pool. So we opened the East End pool, and that will be 0.25% on the tax increase next year. So there is a path. Administration has prepared a budget, and we can get to zero. It would not be pretty getting to zero this year. And to get to zero would require some very painful cuts that I think the community would have a hard time accepting, including the closures of one or more libraries, including the potential closure of Forest Glade Community Center. There are some deep cuts that would definitely have an impact on the residents in the community in order to get to zero this year. So when we look at the costs that we can control, for the most part within the city function, it's 1.7%. And then if they add the cost for the ABCs, it adds another %. So I guess the starting point in the budget is 2.7%. And I would suggest it's only down from there. There's a number of things that we can do, I think, at my review of the budget, that you know, we can move that number to a more reasonable level. And when I talk about holding the line, I'm talking about what's the rate of inflation, and how do we get it in that ballpark as opposed to 2.7%. But council will certainly have some decisions to make in this budget. Again, one of the things they could discuss is the contribution to capital, the $2 million that I mentioned. One of the things I want to talk about as well is parks, one of the costs. And so you'll see in the budget $500,000 that's been allocated for parks. And one of the things that I noticed, certainly from my time here, I know administration noticed, and I know the public noticed and appreciated as well, was when we outsourced garbage collection. We didn't let go of any of the employees in the waste collection division. We actually kept them all, and they had the opportunity to move to the parks division. And in so doing, we were able to greatly increase the level of service that we provided in parks. That came at a cost, of course, and we took, you know, it just delayed really the savings, the full savings that we could have realized on the garbage collection outsourcing. So it took longer to see and realize that savings. You know, when we look at some of the things we're doing, we think there's an opportunity to spend more in parks and move some folks around that would give us the opportunity to enhance the service and bring it to a level that we think is appropriate, and that would cost about $500,000. Something else you'll notice in the budget, I asked administration to put in something with respect to a voucher program for bulk garbage collection, and that's being estimated at about $200,000 per year. So that would give residents an opportunity. If you have a couch, if you have a large item that, you know, I don't have a pickup truck. So if I have a couch and I have to get rid of it, I'm probably like a lot of you, or I have to call a neighbor or a friend or someone who has a pickup truck or a minivan. We put the seats down and we bring it to the dump. So we're looking at and have put in the budget $200,000 to implement a voucher program that would give residents the opportunity to buy a voucher, to be able to put that item at the curb, and we'd create the system that would allow residents to get rid of those items without having to beg, borrow, or I won't say steal, but beg or borrow a pickup truck to do so. So that's $200,000. So. Again, there's lots of things in the budget book. I just gave you the highlights. I'll see if there's anything you want to say, or Joe, anything you want to say, feel free to jump in. But I want to reiterate the fact that at the end of the day, we are not eating the MPAC assessment here. We are looking at this without that assessment, and we're looking at, again, starting at $391 million on the board behind me, and what is the dollar increase from there. So if you did 391 and you multiplied by 2.7%, I would say to you that that's the absolute upper end of what you would expect. But in my mind, in my review of the budget so far, I think there's opportunities to get this at a level that is far more reasonable. I'm not saying you haven't been reasonable, but far more reasonable and acceptable to the residents in the city, that would allow us to enhance service in some areas and would not have significant you would not see significant cuts in service.